Welcome back to the Kelowna Real Estate Podcast. I'm your mortgage broker host, Taylor Atkinson.
And I'm your real estate agent host, Matt Glenn. And for the 100th time, how's it going today, Taylor?
100 episodes, man.
Yeah.
Did you think we would make it here when we first started?
Honestly, no, but I don't think I thought we wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm impressed with us. It's pretty good. 2.5 years. We started at the beginning of 2023.
That's a long relationship, man. That's a lot of conversations.
That is, yeah. 100 recorded ones.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it takes us about 2 hours pre-show just rambling before we get into anything. Yeah, I think, when we originally started this, we have had that question before, like, what's the purpose of the show? Why did you guys start it? And I think for you and I, and I'll let you speak on this too, but I think it was just for fun. We were out golfing and thought there was a void in the market that Kelowna could use a podcast. And we wanted to talk to interesting people, which, man, over 100 shows, like, I'm amazed some of the guests we've had.
I know, it's pretty cool. We just ask people to come on and most of the time they're like, sure. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Now people know our secret. They're like, oh.
Yeah. No, it's been awesome.
It's been great. I mean, thank you to you. Very grateful to have such a good co-host. Yeah. Thank you.
I wasn't sure if you're talking to the listener.
Yeah. Well, second up, thank you to the listener. Singular.
Yeah.
And to the guests again, we have had some amazing guests and repeated. They've come back on multiple times. So
yeah, honestly, for me, the biggest strength is I know that the key to being successful is consistency. And I feel like working with you has been extremely good to keep me consistent, showing up to these. We're doing them regularly. And it's been very rewarding. Yeah, I got to say thank you to you for that and to just the podcast in general. Yeah, and a listener. But I think that's been very good, a steady thing to have in my life and my business for sure.
Yeah, there's an accountability factor to it when we're both like, oh crap, we need to get an episode out. Yeah, and somebody we also need to thank is our producer Nikki. She's been an absolute rock. So yeah,
honestly, she's been so good. If anybody listening wants to start their own podcast, reach out to Nikki because holy shit, she makes us sound so much better than we sound in real life. So it's she does impressive work, so I cannot shout her enough. So yeah, if you're looking for any help like that, definitely reach out to her.
Yeah,
I'll get her to put her own deets in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this episode, like every other episode, is sponsored by Century 21 Assurance Realty, best brokerage in town, best brokerage in the Okanagan. We're growing in Kelowna, Vernon, Kamloops, Kootenays. We're here. So if you're an agent looking for a new place to land or a buyer or seller looking for an agent, give us a shout. Love to talk to you.
What does the next 2.5 years look like? What can people expect? What are we going to do for another 100 shows? You got any ideas?
I think people will still be buying and selling and pondering over what's happening in the real estate market. Hopefully there's less rule changes and stuff for us to break down and more market cycle stuff.
Yeah.
Kelowna is also changing a lot. So there's a ton to talk about there.
Honestly, it seems hard to keep up with sometimes, the amount of legislation changes and policy changes that they come out with.
I kind of feel like those are going to start not being as much. What do you think about that?
Yeah, hopefully. I feel they're coming out with a lot of changes, but with caveats to them that the headlines seem like a big change, but the impact might be quite small.
Yeah.
Which isn't the worst thing, but yeah, I feel there'll be a lot of little tweaks as we go. Even when we recorded with Ryan Smith, City of Kelowna was yeah, we'll review this in a year. We just have to keep tweaking, but we can't make big changes because we don't need that volatility.
Yeah. I just have to talk about this right now. So we talked with Ryan Smith, and I've been talking a lot on this pod and off about modular housing and prefab housing.
Yeah.
We talked about it last week with Ryan. And last week we find out just after that show that SRI is closing in Kelowna.
Oh.
Yeah. It's what? That's a major employer. I don't know how many people they employ, but got to be in the hundreds. And it feels like modular housing is just on the cusp. We have Mark Carney talks about it all the time. Mm-hmm. Ryan Smith mentioned it in his Kelowna plan. And then the very next day or a couple of days later, they announced they're closing that. That's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe an opportunity for another company to take over that then.
I think there is a major opportunity. Like the problem is with a business, they can't just wait forever for like things to change. So like they need to have money coming in, and I'm sure there's other factors too, but everyone seems to be talking about it, and it does seem like the most logical thing to hit the housing needs. So honestly, that surprised me, that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
Where do we see the market like in the next little while? What's your take on it right now? I mean, spring market's kind of like, we've just kind of like finished it, really.
Yeah. The spring market has been extremely lackluster, right? Like I don't think it's been off a cliff. It's definitely not booming. Like this has been a below average year. I don't know the exact stats, but it's definitely below average. Like my personal business is doing okay, which I'm super thankful for all my clients. So thank you. But like you just hear about it. Listings are harder to sell. Every subject is a battle. Like it feels like we got to be near the bottom or nearing the bottom. I've been hearing a lot of comments like, is this slowdown different? Is this a recession? Is this different than all the others? And it's just like, when the market was just pumping in 2020, 2021, and 2022, everyone kind of thought that was going to last forever. And then it starts slowing down, and then you think this is going to last forever. And it's just, as a collective, I think we need to get better at just realizing that it just goes up and down and up and down. And like we said it a lot at the beginning of our show, in our first episodes, like the housing market, it really is like a yo-yo on an escalator, right? Like sometimes the yo-yo bounces a little farther down, but it's still on its way up in the long term. And like, I'm not saying that you're going to have massive gains if you buy now, but like, I also don't think that you're going to lose a farm.
Something I've learned over the last few years too is it's very asset specific and geographic as well. Like, we can't just say on a broad scale, oh, this is where we're at in Canada or BC or even Kelowna. Big White will act totally different than Kelowna to Peachland to Penticton. The condo market right now is like looking pretty saturated, but if you have a home that's like a single family home for $950,000, I bet you that's going to sell pretty quick compared to a condo at 500, So
yeah, honestly, so in my own life, so I had rented out a basement suite I had in West Kelowna, and I put an ad up. I got a lot of calls. Like normally when I rent these out, I get a lot of calls, right? And then a lot of applications. Then I got to send out, I feel terrible every time. Like it's like sending out breakup notices, everyone, right? Like it's honestly, I hate doing it. It's terrible. I'm like, why didn't you pick me? It's like, I have to draw the line somewhere. I can't give it to 2 people or 3 people. So like, you got to pick someone. But this time I still had a lot of calls. I showed it to 15 people. Out of the 15 people, 3 people applied, and like 2 of them ended up withdrawing their applications. So like, it was markedly different. Building all these rentals is having an effect for sure.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it seems like there's more coming. So I don't know. Like, I think that is an interesting, like, it's not, I didn't have trouble doing it. Like I showed it to 15 people. So I was never worried about it, but like, it was different than normal.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we were just complacent, used to being like, hey, as soon as you put something up for rent, somebody's going to pick it up right away.
No, exactly. Yeah.
But it does seem like from a government position, they're kind of forcing more rentals. Like it feels like, the systems are just being built that in Canada now we're just like supposed to rent for a longer period of time. So,
well, and they're also making it like attractive to rent. Like rents are coming down. All the rules favor the tenant.
Tenancy.
Yeah. Totally. Like, so it's kind of like their rental buildings are becoming newer and nicer. Some of them are having nice amenities. The landscape is definitely changing where being a renter is not like the worst thing, right? There are pros to it for sure. Obviously, I'm still pro home ownership, but there is something to be said about just being a long-term renter, like definitely.
Yeah, I guess I'm becoming a little more cynical with my investor hat. Maybe that's just getting a little bit older and trying to protect the nest egg a bit, but I agree with you. I think like best investment in real estate is your primary residence. Yeah, there are times where like renting may outweigh that with, where mortgage rates are or not, but the incentives are still there for exemption on capital gains on your primary residence. And, even if you throw a suite in, having some of that rental income, like that stuff really helps out. So yeah, I agree with you. I think everyone should own their own home if they can.
Actually, on this podcast, my thinking on this has changed a little. I used to just be like, yes, everyone own a home. But now I've worked with many people. I think we talked about this with Ryan last week on the pod, is that who have had a mortgage for their entire lives, like entire adult lives, they're talking 30 years, whatever it is. And they just pay the mortgage and then they eventually pay off their house. So that's nice. But then they don't ever do anything with their equity and they just kind of just wait until they pass away. It's almost like the mindset is to just hold on to your house and then just give it to the next generation, right?
Mhm.
Where I feel like if that's your only goal, then why is home ownership better than renting? You know?
Yeah. Interesting point. Like in my mindset right now,
Yeah.
if I was older and had my house paid off, I would absolutely sell, go rent a wicked penthouse
This is
with
what I
no
mean.
maintenance, and then travel and retire.
But you just rewind the clock 20 years, like you got to pay a mortgage anyway. Why don't you just pay a rent? Rental have no risk, right? You can put that money somewhere else.
Mhm.
So like, it's just, my mind has changed because I know so many people, like I'm talking half people out there just do this. They don't never use their equity for anything else besides moving, like putting it towards the next house, or it just sits there. So if that's the goal, maybe rentling isn't that bad. But if your goal is to like split the equity, buy in rental properties, invest it other ways, then like obviously it's different. So that's where my mindset has shifted. So I still believe that home ownership is awesome, but I think that you got to kind of have a plan to what you're going to do with it.
Yeah. I still feel like homeownership, one of the biggest issues in Canada is the expectations of what you get with a home. You know, like we complain about the cost of housing being so, unaffordable, but
Yeah.
it's truly because we want a 3-car garage with a pool and a view and walkable. And, it's like, wow, we got to start making.
And one of the nicest
realistic
cities in the country.
Yeah. But I mean, the government has been coming out with some incentives for, first-time home buyers, essentially to try and get, people that aren't in homes to migrate that way. So yeah, do you want to chat about that a little bit?
Yeah. So just the other day, GST on new builds is now waived if you're a first-time home buyer, up to $1 million, and then it tears down to $1.5 million after that. Like that's a big deal. So like right now to buy, I have a 4-plex listing on Ethel right now, and 2 of them have sold for $725. And those first 2 people were both first-time home buyers, as far as I know. I was a lister, so I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure they were first-time home buyers. So they had to pay GST, which was on $725 is like almost $35,000. Because they were first-time home buyers, they wouldn't have had to pay the property transfer tax. So now those are the first 2 units of the build. And so there's still 2 for sale. And now the other 2, they get the GST waived. If they're first-time home buyers, they have $35,000 off. Plus they have no property transfer tax. So like a first-time home buyer compared to a second-time home buyer, you're saving like almost 50 grand on a $750,000 purchase. That's a huge difference.
I mean, it's great for first-time home buyers.
Yeah,
but man, if I was a first-time home buyer and I had some 6 months ago that bought new condos, I'd be kind of pissed.
6 months ago, dude. 6 days ago.
Yeah. Well, it's like,
I don't think it's fully passed yet, but it's supposed to take effect a couple days ago on the 27th. But I think it says right in there that you can't just kill the first contract and write a new one with a newer date.
Man, they're good, but some of these changes are tough. I mean, we spoke a little bit about this off air. I think to me, it kind of frustrates me a little bit when they come out with like a headline that excites people and then they put these conditions on it that it's like, it's not applicable to everyone. And I think something that would resolve like home ownership, and I mean, you brought this up, was as long as it's your primary residence, like let people be more flexible on their owner occupied. Yeah. If you're going to buy a rental, sure, you can tax that investor. But like as an owner occupied primary rental, if you want builders to build and you want to waive GST on a very small group of people, like, yeah, great for first time home buyers. But just like, what if someone bought a condo 2 years ago, they got married, had a kid, they need a bigger place, they're moving to a new townhouse, let them roll that over, like waive the GST.
Also, I was thinking about this last night. It kind of skews the market. All first time home buyers are just going to buy new because you're getting a massive discount.
Yeah.
Right. So not all, obviously, but like you can't even really buy a brand new house in that range. You are in the condo townhouse land, but like what a major discount.
I mean, condos have been pretty saturated, Kelowna specific, for 12 months, 18 months.
Yeah.
Do you think this has enough legs to like revive the condo market at all?
Bump for sure. I don't think it's going to revive. Like it's not going to be all of a sudden condos are booming. I was thinking that the developers and the marketers for these pre-sales are going to start targeting first-time home buyers massively now.
Totally.
Right. Like, and even just for an agents would also be trying to meet these people. Yeah. Because like you're talking about almost a $50,000 discount on a $750,000 place compared to the same buyer that just happened to buy a place a couple of years ago. Oh, right. So like it does have a kind of weird effects like that.
Yeah. I mean, selfishly, I was thinking about when I bought my first place and it was new. And I was like, oh, why can't I waive GST on that? 20 years ago. Come on. But,
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I guess, like you think, well, why did they do this? Why didn't they do that? We talked about this a few episodes ago, and I think the government just wants the money or needs the money or it's already spent the money or, like they probably just can't just give GST for free because it's a massive amount of money, right?
Yeah.
Like it's 5% on the sale. Like everyone knows houses aren't cheap. So 5% is a lot of money.
Yeah. But I mean, if it's going to let people build, they're going to tax them on other areas, right? Like we need builders to build at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, we wanted to kind of review like a very basic 5 steps how to sell and buy a home. Because speaking to, a lot of first time home buyers, yeah, we're getting a lot of people come in and just aren't sure of the process, which is totally fair. But we thought we'd just kind of lay it out in 5 simple steps. So I'll just highlight the steps and then we'll kind of dive into it. But essentially, step 1 is preparing to sell. Okay. If you have an existing home, obviously, if you don't, skip to step 2. Step 2 is getting a pre-approval and a mortgage budget. Step 3 is going to buy a home. Step 4 is getting an accepted offer. And step 5 is possession of that home. Okay. So Matt, how about you take the lead on number 1? Just what does it look like preparing to sell your home if you have an existing home? How do people find an agent? What does that look like?
Yeah, so good question. So a lot of people like get an agent referred to them through a friend or they know somebody. And I think that's a great approach. End of the day, you have to still interview them, make the agent go through their listing presentation. They're still selling your biggest asset. It's a big deal. You got to interview the agent, make sure you like them. Especially right now, listing a house can take a long time. So if you just don't like the agent, that's probably not a great idea. If you got to be in touch with this person for a long time. So I think to keep that in mind. Second thing to keep in mind is when you go to buy a house, there's 2 ways to do it, right? You can buy a house first or you list your house. Depends on your financial situation. You need to talk to a mortgage broker about how you want to do that. It's kind of personal for everybody. But one thing to keep in mind is when you buy a house, you have to come up with a deposit on the purchase when you remove all your subjects generally, right? So a lot of people have a lot of equity in their house, as we were talking about before, and not a lot of cash. So that can be something to think about where you're going to need 2 to 5% of the purchase price on the deposit on your purchase. And a lot of people don't have that or are struggling to come up with that because all their money is in their current house. So that is something to think about also. There are ways around it, but something to think about. When you want to list your house, and you need to sell your house to buy another one, which most people do. You list your house and then you wait for an offer to come in. And then when that offer comes in, you just put in there a seller subject to be able to find a house. And that way you're not selling your house before you found a new one. So you're not homeless at any point. Or when you're going out to buy, you buy a house first and subject to sale. And then you list your house and then you got to wait for your house to sell. So there's kind of 2 different ways to protect yourself in that way. Make sure that you're not homeless. So it's a bit of a confusing situation and very subjective, but those are general outline of that. What do you think, Taylor?
I think it's very market dependent, right? Like right now we see a ton of subject to sales because it's hard to sell homes. 3 years ago, you would buy a home and then you would sell yours because you knew you would sell yours in 5 days. Yeah. It really depends on where the market is. And when it's a more balanced market, it might be a bit harder to make a decision on that.
There's just so many factors. And you're right. It's like your personal situation, it's the market situation. So there are a lot of ways to do it. And this is where you need an agent that has a bit of experience to kind of guide you through this.
Yeah. I guess one question for you for an agent, like say I'm listing my home and I have 3 agents come over and they do a listing presentation. It must be hard for clients not to go for someone that's like, hey, I'm going to list it at the upper price. How do clients know how to set expectations? Like you guys come up with a CMA, like a market analysis and say, here are the current sales. Here's what's currently the inventory. Here's where I think your home is going to sell for. Yeah. But if another agent comes in and, they want to price it $100,000 over, like how do clients know who's right and who's wrong?
When you go into a home, you have to be honest. Like it's a big deal for sellers. So I think just being honest, show them what the market is doing, and everybody's in a different position, right? So if one agent is just going to promise them the world, like, is that the truth? Like it's at the end of the day, it's the market is going to tell you how much it's worth, right? Yeah. So if the seller is okay to wait a little while and then you laid out the situation, and they want to price a little higher, like we can do that. You just have to be honest about the situation and say like, well, if we don't get any action in 2 weeks, maybe we start lowering, or if we test the market here. A lot of the times the agents know what the house is going to sell for, or at least have an idea. That being said, single family houses in Kelowna are all pretty unique because we don't live in a grid, right? Like there's different views, like the views this part of the lake are different than that part of the lake. Like even if two houses on the same street that are the same might not be the same, they have different ways. So it's really hard to compare. It's a science and an art mixed in. At the end of the day, you just have to be honest and go with that approach.
You see it far too often, and I would probably put myself in this position too. If people are looking at upsizing right now is probably a good time to do it because there's a bit of a discount on everything. But if you're in a, $650,000 townhome and you list it at that, and somebody offers you 630, you can probably make that up on the buy side. But so many people get caught up on like, no, 650 is my bottom line. I have to sell for 650. But it's like, yeah, but to shave 20 grand off $1 million price is far more achievable.
That is actually a great point. And a lot of times I do break that down. It's like, don't look at your sale price and look at what's the difference in price you want to handle here. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you go with that mindset, it does make things a lot easier and it's kind of more palatable, and it just makes sense in the end. So I love that approach.
Yeah. All right. So number 2 of this process is getting a pre-approval. And this kind of ties into that last piece. So when I do a pre-approval with clients, I send out an application, takes about 20 minutes to fill out. We front load the process. So we collect all the income documents, make sure that, we've actually underwritten the file before you go out shopping, as well as if you do have a property to sell, we break down net sale proceeds. So if you're going to list for X amount of dollars, we put that in, we take out real estate commission, legal fees, paying out your existing mortgage, estimated on penalty. So we have like a very rough ballpark of, okay, when you sell your home, you're going to be left with $150,000. Then we take that over to the purchase. And we also account for, do you have any savings you want to add to this purchase, or do you want to keep some of that equity out, or do you just want to use the full 150 for that purchase? And then we have to account for things like property transfer tax, legal fees, appraisal, any of the other closing costs associated with that. So we really want to break it down pretty much to the dollar, what the transaction is going to cost. And then in turn, once we get the max pre-approval amount, some people would like to see, or some people want to know what their max monthly, mortgage payment's going to be. We then break down the monthly mortgage payments, strata fees, if applicable, home insurance, property tax, utilities, stuff like that. So people know exactly how much the transaction is going to cost, but then also how much their monthly costs are going to be for that house. And we do that almost in sync with, if Matt's doing a listing presentation, because then we know hypothetically what the home's going to sell for, and hypothetically what that transaction is going to cost. And, at the end of the day, people are not going to sell their home if they're not going to then be able to afford a new home, right? Like you have to know that you can then go purchase a home if you're going to sell a home. So we want to do that. And specifically now, because, if somebody bought that home 7 years ago when interest rates were incredibly low, they probably would have qualified no problem. Now it might be a little bit harder to qualify. So just because you bought a $600,000 condo 6 years ago, you may or may not be approved for that same value. So yeah, that's kind of how the pre-approval works. Then you go out, start shopping. And then once you get that accepted offer, then, we just push the button and we have all the documents. And, ideally we can remove subject to financing very quickly because we've done all of that legwork. And I think it puts you guys in a better position to negotiate, because you can say, hey, we're going in with like minimal subjects, or we can do a quick close.
Yeah. Or just even knowing what we're going up against. Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, then we can kind of move on to buying a home. So let's just, for this scenario, say, we've listed the home, potentially has an accepted offer on it. We've done the pre-approval. So now you're going out shopping. So what does buying look like? I mean, you set them up on like automated listing search, and then you just start walking through homes, or?
Yeah, exactly. So I set up auto search. That's kind of the step one, the easiest. Obviously, everybody has realtor.ca right now. So like people are looking there too. So like the auto searches are kind of hard for us to narrow down for a client until we start to know what the client exactly likes. And even then it can be a little tricky, because you don't want to set the search up for houses under 650 or whatever it is, townhouses under 650. And then one comes up for 675 that just doesn't end up on the search, but as an agent, you can easily negotiate that down. So it's kind of hard to figure this out, the criteria. Usually after we know the client a little better. It gets a little easier, but still not a perfect process. The client will be looking on realtor.ca. I will also be doing that too, because realtor.ca is awesome for realtors too. It's a really nice app. Yeah, we'll go look at a few houses. I always like to see at least a few houses with everybody, because lots of times people walk in and just love the first one, and which is awesome for them and for me, but it's also nice to see other ones just to make sure. And a lot of times like, we'll seal the deal for the first house. And then when that happens, we write an offer. So talk about what the list price is, what the comparables are, what kind of price we should get, what kind of subjects we're going to put in there. And then I, as the agent, will go and draft up the offer, send over the copy to client. We review it together, add anything, change anything, make adjustments, make sure the deposit's accessible. We know when it's coming out. We know what has to be done here. And then once we get all those details sorted out, I can sign the offer in person, or I fire it to you over in DocuSign. We sign the disclosures and all that stuff, get the offer back, and then I'll start negotiating with the listing agent, and we'll submit the offer and go from there. Probably be a couple of counters back and forth, iron out all the details, and then get to accepted offer.
Yeah. So step 4, accepted offer. Perfect segue, Matt. Let's talk about subjects or conditions in there. So, I mean, usually we see like a legal review, which honestly, most people never get done. We've spoken to lawyers on the pod before.
That's like the first thing I always do.
Yeah.
Who's your lawyer? Like on the sell, I don't usually get a lawyer till later on, but on the buy, we get a lawyer as soon as we have an accepted offer. I usually send over a list of 3. Most of them have been on this podcast. They pick one. They can call the office and get a price on all 3 and kind of go that way if they want, which is interesting because pricing for lawyers has been changing lately. Just seems to be kind of what it is. So it's nice to know exactly what the cost is. And then as soon as they pick a lawyer, I'll email the lawyer with all the documents they need. I'll email the lender, the mortgage broker, with all the documents they need. We go through all the subjects. So if you're going to have financing, legal review, insurance.
Yeah, let's talk about financing for a second. So generally, subject to financing, we've done the pre-approval, but we still need to then submit everything to the lender, because lenders are not going to look at documents if we don't have an accepted offer. It'd be a colossal waste of time. Yeah, we can do like, rate holds and stuff with them, but they don't underwrite anything until we have a firm accepted offer.
Also, the house has to be approved as well.
Yeah. Once we get that, we send it in. It generally takes a few days. Depends how busy lenders are. When it's really busy, it could take like 5 business days for them to get a commitment letter back to us. And then on the commitment letter, it states everything in there, hey, we need X amount for income. You got to prove that these are the property taxes. We need an appraisal. So they'll list a bunch of conditions that hopefully we've already satisfied most of those. We send in all the documents, they review them. And as they're reviewing them, they'll basically tick them off and that's good. The one that generally slows us down the most is the appraisal. If it's an insured purchase with less than 20% down, lots of times we can get the appraisal waived. Sometimes if the loan to value is like 65% or less, we can get it appraised, but I would say most of the time we need appraisals. So that system's a little bit frustrating because it's generally a blind order. So we don't have the ability to control it at all. And the reason is because lenders don't want us as brokers or agents or anyone to manipulate it, right? So we order it, it goes out to a handful of appraisers. Somebody contacts the listing agent, gets in there, takes photos, writes a report, and then sends that directly to the lender. And we don't know the value or the report until, it's already in the lender's hand. So that's something, we have to facilitate pretty quickly. Something that's a little bit confusing for people is the difference between an appraisal and an inspection. So a home inspection and an appraisal are entirely different.
That's actually a good point. That's come up a few times.
The home inspection, you can elect to do one or not. I would highly suggest to do one specifically on homes. Condos, maybe less of a need, but it gets a licensed home inspector in that house for 3 or 4 hours, crawling in the attic, checking out the furnace, seeing what the roof looks like, checking foundation, and then they provide you a report. And I guess, in that, sometimes things come back where you may want to walk away from the property entirely. And that is why you have, subject to home inspection, much like subject to financing. If something doesn't come back with the financing as you wanted it to, you have the ability to back out of that with just cause. But the home inspection, maybe they come back and say, hey, the roof is actually 30 years old, when in the listing it didn't say that, and we had no ability to see that the roof was that old because we were just walking through. Maybe then Matt goes to work and negotiates a bit of money off or something.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good point to say that, because when you write an offer, like if you can see the problems, generally they're not that great to negotiate during the home inspection afterwards, right? So like what you can see, the home inspection is for issues that are unforeseen that you just don't know about that come up, right? So if you open the furnace and it's out of date and full of rust, right? Like that happens quite a bit and probably needs to be addressed, or a roof that's leaking in a spot or is way past date, or a hot water tank that is uninsurable because it's 15 years old, stuff like that, right? That you don't know about before you offer, that you can help negotiate after the home inspection. But to use a home inspection as just a straight up tool to negotiate the price offer after, it doesn't usually go over well with the listing.
Yeah, totally. Like you said, it's for unforeseen stuff. If the listing agent puts in, hey, roof is 20 to 25 years old, and then you get a home inspection and it states, hey, the roof is 25 years old, you're not going to then go negotiate on that, so.
Yeah, exactly. So got to be a bit of good faith there. For sure.
Yeah.
So once you work through all your subjects and you've satisfied all of them, you've got an insurance quote, maybe a binder. A lot of times you can't get a binder because you're too far out for insurance, but that's kind of another issue. But you've got a quote, you know how much the insurance is going to be. Lending's approved. You're satisfied with the home inspection. The lawyer's approved all the documents. You're all good to go. And any other subjects you need, if there's a septic tank, you need to get a septic inspection, like all those things. But every house is different. The strata documents, you've reviewed all those if it's a strata property. So there's a lot of different subjects, but once you get to the end of that and you've approved it, you have to remove your subjects. Basically, sign a form that says we're waiving, or all these subjects are fulfilled. The deal is now firm. And then usually at that point or 2 days later is your deposit is due. So your deposit, anywhere from 5 to 50 grand, really, depending on what you're buying, it goes into the brokerage trust and it goes towards your down payment and towards a purchase price of the place, right? So now at this point, the house is sold. It's posted on Instagram. Buyers are doing their happy dance. And then there's a wait of however long is in the contract, week to a couple of months away before the closing date.
Yeah. And during that point, we've wrapped things up on the mortgage side. Instructions will then be sent to your lawyer.
Yeah.
And those instructions will be sent directly from whatever the lender it is, TD, Scotia, Manulife, whatever. The lawyer then reviews those. He'll call you in, or she'll call you in for a signing appointment a few days before closing. You'll sign the legal documents. And if there is a shortfall of funds, like if you need to come up with another 30, 40, 50 grand, or if it's your first home, they'll tell you exactly down to the dollar, hey, bring in a check of this much or deposit a check here. And that will cover, property transfer tax and all the things associated with closing.
And the rest of your down payment or whatever.
Yeah, the rest of the down payment. If you sold a home and all those, costs are being covered from your net proceeds, you won't have to bring in anything. Sometimes they'll cut you a check for the difference if there's a surplus. And then it's possession time. That's when Matt gets to hand you the keys.
Yeah. Possession day is usually the day after closing. Sometimes it's the same day. The problem is we don't always know what time the sale completes. Like anytime from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. it can complete. So if you're planning on moving in on completion day, it's really hard to plan around, because sometimes we don't know. And there is the occasion where there's a snag somewhere in the system and it can't even close that day. It has to wait till the next day. That's why most of the time the possession is scheduled for the following day, just for that reason, right? So when we get the keys, once we get possession, I organize with the listing agent how to get the keys. I go pick them up, or they drop them off, or whatever it is, or they give us a code for the front door, or whatever it is. We get the keys. I meet you there, give you your little basket, bottle of wine, gift cards so you guys can go have some cocktails, all this kinds of thing. And then we walk through the property, make sure everything's good, make sure everything's cleaned. The things that they promised they would do during subject removal are all done. Test the stove and all that kind of stuff. Then you get to start moving.
It's crazy how not perfect that is, right? Like there's a handful of times where something comes up where the dryer doesn't work, or the garage door opener is missing, or like whatever. There's lots of little things. So
there is a lot of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you definitely do a walkthrough and, you're happy with it.
Yeah.
And then after that, what I do on the mortgage side is I have a software, sends out a monthly report, and it basically tells you, hypothetically, here's how much your house is worth. Here's your current mortgage rate. Here's how much you've paid down on principal, all that stuff. So every month you'll get an email kind of showing you, your updated mortgage position. And if rates drop and there is an opportunity to break that mortgage and save money, you'll be notified every single month, like, hey, there could be a potential savings of $8 or $9 or $10,000 if we want to restructure things, if you want to refinance and pull equity out. So I'm constantly monitoring that in the background, and you're being updated every month. And that will include, prepayment penalties or penalties associated to break the mortgage and restructure and stuff like that.
Damn, I didn't know you did that. That's awesome.
Yeah, we've kind of always been doing it with Excel, but it's obviously pretty labor intensive. So yeah, there's a new software that's come out for brokers that a lot of us are using. It's called Onwell. It's pretty slick, but it gives you like a hypothetical, hey, here's a potential opportunity for savings. So instead of people constantly wondering if they're in the best product and a year goes by and rates drop by 1%, they're like, it just does this every month for you. So yeah, it's pretty slick. And if anybody just wants me to put it in the system, I can always just do that. And, if you're not a past client, and we can just watch your mortgage for you.
That's an opportunity.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's kind of the process of selling, buying. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff in there that
there is a ton of stuff like
we didn't talk about because
it's hard because every situation is so different,
Yeah.
right? Like this is again why an agent with experience is so nice, because like there is a ton of things that can come up like that we didn't even cover. So that is definitely a nice high level of what's going on.
Well, one of the awesome things is you can scroll back 100 episodes. And if you listen to everything, you'll probably find all the information somewhere in there.
And we'll be best friends by then. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of wraps up this show. But yeah, Matt, thank you again for this journey, man.
Yeah, 100 episodes. So now when we send out episodes, it's going to be like episode 100 and something. Let's get some flair to it, man.
Yeah. We should have just started at episode 100 and we would have had that flair right up.
Kelowna Real Estate 101.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, we missed that one.
Have an awesome day, buddy.
Yeah, you too, dude.
Thanks again for the listeners and guests and everyone that's supported us along the way. And
thank you, Nikki.
Have a good one, dude.
You too.